Hey guys, it's your girl Boonie, and you're listening to episode 172 of the Boonie Breakdown podcast, your source for all things responsible and ratchet. The content in this episode is not meant to be a substitute for professional medical advice, diagnosis, or treatment. Always seek the advice of your own physician or other qualified medical health provider for any questions you have on your own personal medical conditions. Support for today's episode comes from Erin Condren, a lifestyle brand known for creating fun and functional organization essentials for the home, office, and everything in between. Go ahead and get you some high-quality planners and notebooks to custom organizers, decks, accessories, and more. And as a Boonie Breakdown listener, you can receive $10 off your first purchase of $40 or more by using the code RAKUTEN10. That's RAKUTEN10. Details on how to purchase can be found in the show notes and on theboonieBreakdown.com. All right, welcome to this week's episode, guys. We are in for a responsible treat this week. Yes, we had to get through some disclaimers and sponsor notes before we dive into this episode. I am looking forward to the feedback and for you guys to hear this great episode. Our guest is Amma Gordon. She is the co-founder of Global Fertility Connections. And Global Fertility Connections is a company that was birthed out of her own fertility challenges, and they offer intended parents their experience, industry expertise, and customized services on your path to parenthood. This conversation is so great, guys. We talk about fertility and infertility, why it is such a taboo topic, why Black women suffer in silence so much and don't get the help that is out there. Seek it. Do they even know where to go to get the help? And Amma also breaks down some kind of fertility 101. What is the difference between surrogacy, egg freezing, IVF treatments? We get into all of that. So stick around for this conversation. All right, guys. So let's hop into my pick of the week. We know that we lost rap legend this weekend. DMX passed. And I think my pick of the week this week is just all of the amazing videos that people were sharing of DMX. Some of them were the most random things of him, you know, making omelets in IHOP in Buffalo, or dancing on a street corner, or preaching on a street corner, or saying a prayer. And I think those videos really helped me process his loss. It's always interesting when you know, celebrities die and people who have shaped some part of your life indirectly and you don't know them personally. And if you would have told me that if DMX died, I would have shed tears, I would not have believed you. But literally, I think my entire 4 years in high school was the peak of his career. And so I think when I played Party Up, a few tears dropped. But those videos all were so amazing. And if you haven't seen any of them, I'm sure you can go on. I don't follow the Shade Room, but if you go on the Shade Room or one of those sites, but they're all on Twitter. That's where I saw most of them. So those are my pick of the week this week, because it was just really good to see him living life. And it helped me process the grief that I experienced. And if you have not listened to, this is another plug, Therapy for Black Girls, I'm not sure the episode number, but she did a podcast, Dr. Joy did a podcast about how do you grieve a person that you didn't know? Like, how does that even make sense? So I remember listening to that episode. I can't remember which celebrity had passed when she had did that episode, but it's always a good one to go back to, because you feel crazy. Like, I don't know this person, but they were a big part of your life at some point, right? And so check that episode out. You can search it in your podcast app or on Google, and it should come up. All right, let's hop right into this housekeeping, because we have a few things to go to before we get into the conversation with Amma. First up is the feedback from episode 171, Do Not Be a Pick Me, with Dr. Donna Oriowo. Listen, I have not gotten so much feedback about an episode in a long time. You guys loved this episode with Dr. Donna. I got a few messages about why did y'all have to snatch our edges like that? So many of you said you had sent the episode to your friends to listen to. You had conversations about it with your parents. So I really appreciate all of you. In particular, who sent a message or a DM about how this episode impacted you. And so I just want to thank all of you for listening. And I do want to highlight this one DM I received because I thought what was said was so spot on and so perfect. This episode was absolutely amazing. It was so responsible. I listened twice and so many gems in the conversation. I shared it with my mother to listen. My favorite line was, "You don't apply to only one job at a time. So why would you only date one person at a time?" So many people talked about that particular quote in their feedback. So again, thank you all for listening. Just a reminder that SoundCloud will not house the entire catalog of the Boonie Breakdown podcast. So I'm encouraging you all, if you listen on SoundCloud, to listen on any of the other podcast apps. You have, Apple Podcasts, Google Podcasts, Spotify, Stitcher, Overcast, Podbean. There are so many other outlets you can listen to. You can also listen over on YouTube. I'm asking you guys to also subscribe to our channel. We're so close. As soon as I get 150 followers, we will drop our first video over there. We're very close to 100 the last time I checked. And then once we get 100 followers, I can get the Vanity URL, so you can go to youtube.com/the Boonie Breakdown. Make it very easy, but we need a couple more people in order to do that. So if you would be so kind to subscribe over on YouTube, it's very easy. As long as you have a Google account, which most of us do with Gmail, then you have a YouTube account and you can go ahead and hit the subscribe button. And that's all you need to do. And I appreciate you guys so much. Also, if you're new here or you've been listening for a few episodes, not sure how you feel about it, still feeling us out, I would encourage you and implore you to follow us on social media. We're on Instagram and Facebook at The Boonie Breakdown. We're on Twitter just at Boonie Breakdown. We're also on Pinterest. You can follow us over there. I just said YouTube. We're pretty much everywhere. It's just The Boonie Breakdown, and you can follow us in all those places. If you would like to leave us a 5-star review, you can do so over an Apple Podcast. If you listen in Overcast, I was told you can leave 5-star reviews in Overcast as well. So yes, we love 5-star reviews. And that is it for me, guys. So let's get into this conversation and let's get ready to break it down. All right, guys. So this is a overdue episode for me, but I'm excited to have here Alma Gordon of Global Fertility Connection. Welcome to the Boonie Breakdown.
Woo woo! I'm excited.
I'm gonna just put it out there. We went to college together. We were in marketing classes together for a few, like junior and senior year in college.
Yes. And we lived in the same dorm too.
We did. Look, was that freshman year?
Yeah. Johnson and Harwick, everybody, who has made it through freshman year in those dorms are better people for it. So
I cannot believe that was almost 20 years ago. Isn't that crazy? Like,
it's crazy how time flies.
How is that possible? But the reason why you're here, because we have that connection, following on social, I was like, whose post is this? Saw that you had started this new venture with Global Fertility Connection, which is so awesome. So first, can you just tell us how you got into this space and you decided to settle in doing work in this industry?
Yeah, it is literally a labor of love, right? So Global Fertility Connections, what we do is we help people have babies, right? Just to break it down simply. And there's a lot of people out there that have challenges or just biologically don't have the ability because of same-sex marriages, right? Especially same-sex males, right? If you just take it back to sort of high school sex ed class, right? You need 3 things to have a baby. You need sperm, you need an egg, and you need someone to carry it. So, as much as we like to believe that when we get into relationships or partnerships and when we're thinking about building a family, we have all three of those things,
Mm,
we may or may not have all three of those things, depending on what your relationship is and your partnership is. And then, if you do have all three of those things aren't necessarily prepared to be able to fully function in the way we want them to. As much as we want our
yes.
bodies to work, we can will it to work. Sometimes we need a little help, and that is where assisted reproductive technology comes in. AKA going to the fertility doctors and all the things that come along with it. IVF clinics, surrogacy, egg donation, all of it is what we help people do. So
I feel like that space is so expansive just with even the short list that you've rattled off. And I feel like it's becoming less taboo, but it's still a taboo
oh
topic
yeah.
to talk about fertility and or infertility, right?
Yeah, yeah. I call it so. What we do is we connect what we call in the business intended parents. So, it's anybody who wants to have a baby. We connect them with the right reproductive services for exactly what they need. So, if you're HIV positive, if you're single, if you're a same
Mm,
sex couple, if you have, you can't carry, so you have to go through surrogacy or any of those things, everyone has a unique case. And rather than sort of scouring the internet, going to what's now virtual conferences. People used to travel all
yeah.
over the country and world to try to get the right information. You start with us. We do a consultation, understand exactly what your unique needs are, and we put together a personalized plan that fits within your budget and unique needs. So we do all the work for you, and the ethics and standards that we require of our reproductive service partners are above the national average for success rates,
Mm.
and they meet legal and ethical standards that, quite frankly, don't even exist within the world of surrogacy or egg donation. It's like the wild, wild west. No one is regulating it. So we've become sort of the gatekeepers for these intended parents, and we start from what I call the beginning of the funnel. So egg freezing, and I call that dinner table talk. It's okay
Yes.
because it's less taboo. It doesn't imply that there's any problem. People, I like to say it's like insurance, right? If you have
Yeah, it's
car
like a
insurance,
little a savings account.
exactly. It's like, if you have car insurance, you hope you don't get into an accident. But if you need to use your insurance, you are damn excited that you have it because it saves the day. And that's how I think of freezing eggs. So we go from that end all the way to the other ends of the funnel, which I call after dinner conversation, after you've had a few drinks, right? Everyone gets a little more relaxed, right? And that's surrogacy. Totally taboo. It obviously implies that you can't do this naturally in
Hmm.
some sort of way or fashion. And we help all the way through to that end of the fertility journey as well.
Okay, before I jump in my deep rabbit hole, I want to say something too. Like, it just popped in my mind. Do you work with clients who would like to use a surrogate for vanity reasons, right? Like, not even that they health wise could not, but it's just like, I don't want to carry a baby, but I want one that is biologically mine.
Yeah, we don't have any at the present moment, but we can, right? Because all the steps that go into it are the same in terms of
Hmm.
what you need for that to happen. You need someone to carry it. So if you're going to go through a surrogacy agency or if you're going through a personal friend or contact, there's a lot of legal things that have to happen. Contracts have to be made, screenings have to be done. So you need an IVF clinic. So honestly, people who do it for vanity reasons, I don't know too many of them because once they go down that road, it is way more complicated than it
Mm.
seems like in your brain. So if you're doing it, not only is it super expensive, and when I say super expensive, I mean over $125,000
Woo.
minimum,
Yeah.
up to 250. It really depends. So once you think about the financial toll it might take and the emotional and mental toll of completely relinquishing all control to someone else
Mm.
to take their medication, to show up to the doctor's appointments, that vanity starts, that little bubble that you're like, I don't want to do this because I don't want my tummy to, my abs.
Yeah.
It starts to change the whole scenario. So I don't know too many people, and we haven't had any clients that want to do it for vanity reasons. I'm sure they exist. I just haven't encountered them yet. Our clients really have, different challenges and sort of the hardest cases, quote unquote, if you will.
Understood. No, when you said that, and one of the questions I received from one of my listeners kind of teetered on that line of, they were skirting around saying vanity, but that's what they were implying.
Yeah. No, I mean, there's a lot of women, I get it. Pregnancy does not seem fun
at all.
It's not so many women I know that are like, oh, pregnancy is amazing.
Sign me up. Yeah.
So I'm sure they exist. And if you have the financial means and you're willing to sort of let go of that responsibility, you're good. And I just want to give a heads up. I'm in Brooklyn. So here, I live in Brooklyn, New York. We are recording during COVID virtually. So
look, I feel like every New Yorker who comes on this podcast makes that same disclaimer at some point.
if you hear any sirens, everything is under control. I
feel like everyone makes that disclaimer. So my audience here at the Boonie Breakdown is primarily Black women. Majority single, I'm going to say late 20s, but mostly mid 30s to mid 40s.
Yep.
And so I feel like Black women in particular suffer in silence with fertility issues. We don't talk about it. We've recently seen, celebrities, Gabrielle Union, I think Michelle Obama in her book last year mentioned some of her struggles with trying to conceive.
Tyra Banks had a surrogate.
So we've seen these. We can even say Kim K. We know she used a surrogate for her last 2 children.
Yep. Candy Burris from The Real Housewives of Atlanta.
I mean, the list goes on. So it's helpful that you have these references in pop culture to know that I'm not alone. I'm excited about this conversation because I do want it to be loud. Like, I know somebody listening, people that I know personally who want to have children. It's looking bleak because they're unpartnered. So it's like, how does this work? But I'm not giving up on being a mother.
Yeah. And, and no one has to, you know what I mean? There's so many ways of building a family. And as long as you're open to what that might look like, then everyone has the opportunity to build a family, to be a mother, to be a father, to be a parent. And that is really the mission that my company was built on. It was built out of my own personal struggles with infertility when I was married. It took such a toll on me that my marriage didn't even survive it. And there's so many other couples, singles that have gone through such a tumultuous journey as well. I just remember you mentioned, feeling alone, right? And the disparity for people of color and minorities and Black women, right? And I was that, and I still am that, right? I'm still on my journey, and everyone on my team has been a part of the process in some form or fashion. So my business partner, she has 2 sons from IVF, and we're global. She's located in Australia. So just understanding what internationally those legal constraints are, right? People during COVID, people can't even travel, right? You can't even, if you live in Australia, New Zealand, some of those countries,
they weren't getting out.
Right. Like, hey, we're going to protect our population. So people can't travel, but sperm can, and so can embryos, and so can eggs, right? So there's a lot of information that is required in expertise. And I have a surrogate on my team who's been a surrogate. She carried 3 babies for another family. We have 2 gay dads that had babies through surrogacy. They're also our consultants. So we really try to marry the information and education through the experience of fertility, also with the personal journey, because, it's almost like we're talking about your audience is Black women, right? It's just like talking to somebody about being Black, but you're not Black. Right? Yeah. It's like, I'm sorry, this sounds good, but did you read that in the book, or did you really feel? Have you ever walked on the street and felt like you weren't given an opportunity just because of the way you look? No? Yeah. Okay, so zip it, right? So we don't want that to be the case as it relates to fertility. So I try to round out the team where there's some sort of connection because it makes people feel comfortable. And you admit there is such a big gap between access to information, services, resources within fertility for Black people
Mm-hmm.
and others, right? And white people, right? And it's not even just fertility because it's tied to healthcare. Fertility is healthcare.
And I think that was one of the biggest things when I was doing some prep work for this conversation. The biggest thing it was two glaring statistics that I saw. And in talking about healthcare, it was that 60% of Black women have fibroids by the time they reach age 35, which
Mm-hmm.
was
Mm-hmm.
glaring in comparison to our white counterparts.
Mm-hmm.
And I think the other one, it was like white women, like in this age, that was like 25 to 44, they seek out fertility methods or treatments like 2 times more frequently than Black women do.
Mm-hmm.
And
Yeah.
I think
Mm-hmm.
part of that is access. I'll say, like, my story, I'm not sure I want to be a mother. It's not off the table. I don't know if
Mm-hmm.
it's on the table, but it's somewhere
Mm-hmm.
floating. But I appreciate my healthcare practitioner. For years, my gynecologist has been like, Adrian, you've never been pregnant. So you don't want to wait until you're 39 or 40 and you might meet someone and you want to have a baby. And now we have issues. Like, we can be proactive about this versus being reactive. And for a while, I just was like, I don't no, I'm not doing it. But I think this year was the first year, COVID, thinking about legacy, like, wait a minute, maybe
Yeah.
I should take these steps to just explore what could be out there, because she has a point.
Exactly. And you're not the only one. I get a lot of questions about, so has COVID negatively impacted your business? And I'm like, there's certain industries that are inelastic, and having babies is one of them. Right. And when you're intentionally trying to have a baby, putting in the effort, putting in the time to go, above and beyond to build a family, that doesn't just stop. It
Mm-hmm.
might slow down because of your access to the clinics, right? If you can't get an appointment, it has to be virtual or whatever it is, right? And I think for a while, it wasn't considered essential. So IVF clinics did have to close and postpone and reschedule. So unless it was, an essential or emergency procedure, they weren't doing them.
Okay.
But right, those bans have been lifted months ago. Right, procedures have recontinued. I've had fibroid surgery since then, so things have been back in action since the summer of 2020. That's
Okay.
when I had my fibroid removal surgery. I had an open surgery, a myomectomy.
Oh,
But
wow.
but to your point, it's like, wait a minute, tomorrow's not promised. So let's not wait. Let's do what we can now. And that is actually positively impacting the business around fertility and people seeking out help, people wanting to be more proactive because they realize tomorrow's not promised and we don't have forever.
We do not.
So yeah, and and honestly, when it comes to fertility, your eggs and your sperm. So guys, if there's any guys listening, don't think that, oh, women as they get older, they kind of get rotten. Sir, sperm ages too, right? So if you are 35, you got 35-year-old sperm, sir.
Listen, I'm glad you said that, because so much of this burden of the childbearing process, or which is you intended parents, I like that word. I'm going to start using
Yeah.
that. But
Yeah.
so much of that, the burden in heterosexual couples is put on the woman,
Hmm.
and
Hmm.
you never hear, it's always, oh, your eggs going to dry up. It's never anything
Yeah.
about him.
Yeah, they're like, oh, your eggs are scrambled. Excuse me, your sperm are scrambled, sir. Okay, you're
Yes.
right. Right. They're not even swimming straight anymore. They're swimming in circles. You know what I mean? That is called morphology, right? And motility, which is how they move,
Come on, break it
the
down.
direction in which they move. You know what I mean? So
Yeah.
it's
But
just like when we were younger. Like we used to be able to, run and exercise. Might be able to run that mile when we were 25, 35. That mile is coming a
it
little
might take you
slower.
out. Yeah.
So your sperm are moving a little slower. You know what I mean? But yeah, I mean, all of our body, all of our parts age as we age. So it's just something to keep in mind because you mentioned a stat earlier about Black women just having higher infertility rates, and it's true. I mean, I have read the same research that Black women are twice as likely to have infertility issues, and they
Mhm.
are tied to things like fibroids, and even because we specialize in both egg freezing and surrogacy. And even when you think about the options for women, right, it's in embryos don't recognize color. I just want to be clear about that. They just need a nice cozy uterus to settle in, right? That's healthy. But as Black people, we like to to see people that look like us who are fertility doctors, and we
Yeah.
would love to see someone who looks like us carrying our babies, or if we needed an egg donor that looked like us. And the pool is smaller for us. I read a research study recently that said 90% of gestational carriers, so the women who carry those babies in
Hmm.
surrogacy, are white women.
Oh, wow.
7% are Black, and the rest are other. So
So
think
that
about
would
that.
be, I mean, because I'm going to think about myself and I'm going to be transparent here. I think I would struggle. I would definitely struggle if my selection was 12 pages of white women and a half a page of black women. I'm gonna
So
look at the half a page
I'm gonna
first.
correct you. It's not even gonna be a half a page. It might be a quarter of a page.
So I'm gonna be looking at those three women praying that they're not carrying someone else's baby at the time. Like that's where I'm gonna
Yeah.
start. Um,
Yeah, it is tough. But there is hope, and this is really my mission as well, right? We want to help everyone who needs it, but I've
mhm,
got a personal connection with helping people of color, right, and Black women, because I am a Black woman, right, and that includes really uniting with other Black business owners within this space. There's not a lot. I'll be
mhm,
honest. There's not a lot of Black fertility doctors that have a lot of experience, especially within surrogacy. They exist, but it's less than
and
our counterparts.
and while you're saying that, is it like in America at least? Is it just the major cities where you can find these? I know right now
No,
you can have
no,
your consultation with you,
yeah.
but
Yeah, you can.
okay,
Yeah, no, it's not just the major cities for sure.
okay,
Because believe it or not, especially when it has to do with surrogacy, the states that are not the metropolitan cities often have surrogates that live outside of them.
okay.
So some of the companies that get set up, they're kind of outside of the major cities. It's also less expensive to run the practice and things like that. But yeah, I mean, there's a handful of Black owned practices, right? There's a handful of Black owned surrogacy agencies. And, as it relates to Black professionals within this space, we're just really trying to gather together and come together. There's a new organization actually that I recently joined. It's called RAMP.
Okay.
And it's really about, minority professionals within the reproductive space. And this is essentially the purpose of that. It's to really kind of get, people of color who work in this space, who represent the professional space within fertility. And how can we help people that look like us? You know what I mean?
Yeah. And so, like, if someone is kind of just starting this journey, they've had questions about it. Um, is there a way that they could, I guess, what's the first step you can do to even know if you're, and I don't want to say this, but you correct me if my language is wrong, if you're fertile, if you're going to have trouble conceiving, like what would be that first step? And would you advise someone to do that before they came to you as a consultant, or would you assist them in that process?
Yeah. So believe it or not, the time to check your fertility is actually before you're trying. So before it's even on your radar, and that's actually in your 20s. No one tells us that though, right?
No.
And they focus on don't get pregnant, get your education, stay on birth control until you're ready. Nobody prepares us for it not to be easy to be pregnant. So
Hmm.
it's not on our radar to go to our OBGYN and say, hey, I want to check my fertility levels. I want to know what my AMH level is, which is anti-Mullerian hormones, which is really just what your egg reserve count is.
Oh,
Or
okay.
yeah, or if there's any imbalance, if you have any cysts, if you have any fibroids, right? No one, really having deep conversations around your period, because your period is a real indication of what your, reproductive health might be,
Okay.
right? It's not normal to have these really long, really heavy periods. Something is going on, right? But no one even talks about that. Like I remember in college, I had one of my friends in the group that I hung out with a lot, and she used to have to take prescription grade medication every month when her period came
Wow.
because of the pain. And, lo and behold, years later, we realized she had fibroids, and, or like the really long periods. And when I was going through my fertility journey and still am, one of the earlier things that I did was change my diet. I took out dairy, I took out meat, and I saw directly impact, like the
Wow.
direct impact on my period. It got shorter and it got lighter. And my skin got better too. So that was nice.
Come on, skin.
Hey.
And so you're just talked about the influence of diet. We've talked on the influence of age, but if you're starting this path, is there an optimal age to do egg harvesting for going to the egg freezing route? Like, or is it like if you are past this point, it's just too late? We should look at other avenues for.
Yeah, yeah. I don't mean to sound bleak, but that optimal age to do that again is like early, like 20s, right? College, when no one's
Wow.
even thinking about it. And because that is when your eggs are young, a lot of times they are healthy. And if there's any complications at that time is when you can learn about it. But no one's thinking about it at that time.
Yeah, I'm like, because I'm sitting here like everyone's like, all right, well now I'm 33
Yeah,
or
and it's not too late,
35
right?
or
Yeah, it's
yeah,
not too late, and we can talk about when is quote unquote too late. To answer your question of when is the optimal
but
time,
optimal,
it's
yeah.
yeah, and you brought up earlier that disparity between Black culture and others. Let me tell you something.
Like
Our
Black people
white
hard on
counterparts
ourselves.
are, and you know what? It is so much more normalized within other communities. There are fathers that are gifting their college graduate daughters with egg freezing cycles as their gift.
Wow.
Yeah.
What a nifty and thoughtful gift.
So smart, right? Because I mean, it's supportive of, hey, I want you to continue your education. I want you to continue your professional endeavors, but I care about you enough to know that, your eggs, like I said earlier, age with you. And I don't want that to be a hindrance down the line. So here is $15,000, right, to do an egg freezing cycle, because it's not like you have this corporate job with all these fertility benefits yet, right?
Yeah.
So that's what some fathers, right, I read are doing for their daughters as college graduates. And as a Black woman within my community, I mean, I could barely bring it up at the dinner table. You know what I mean?
Yeah, because it's like
And
you say, like if you say anything that's outside of you birthing a child, it's like we don't adopt babies, or it's all
or oh, you know what? It'll be fine. Pray about it,
God.
child.
Yeah, God will do it.
Won't he do it? Yes, he will. Right. And it's like, yes. And God also created reproductive endocrinologists,
Yes.
AKA fertility doctors, so let's use all of the things God has given us to help us
To
be better
help this
prepared.
situation along. Yes. And you just threw out a number here. So, okay, we're going to use me as an example. I come to you, Amma, and I'm like, all right, I'm ready to do this. I know I'm 36, child, but let's see what's left in here to harvest.
No, so okay, yeah. So listen, 36 is not too old. Like I want to be
Okay.
very, very clear. 36 is not too old. I froze my eggs at 34. Well, I had just turned 35, but I started the process at 34 because I did it at the
Okay.
end of the year. And it really depends on what your fertility levels are. So when you go in, they take blood work, they do ultrasounds, right, to
Okay.
get a good understanding of where you sit. And at that moment, they will give you a pretty good diagnosis of here's what your fertility, rank, if you will, is. And here's
Okay.
how much time, maybe, if you're not thinking about it right now, but you're going to want to come back within a year, and then we can check your levels again. And I do have a previous client that, she went, had her levels checked. She was like, all right, cool. I think she was 34. Yeah, she was 34 when she went the first time. And they were like, yeah, your egg reserve is really good. It's kind of in line with like a 28-year-old. So you're fine. And she came back a year later, and it was significantly lower.
Mm.
And typically a year won't change so drastically, but for her, it did. So, the rule of thumb for me is the sooner the better. I have an egg
Okay.
freezing client right now. And, all I did was share my story and share the stories of other clients around timing, around, age, what they were able to get. And just by sharing that, she's like, okay, let me get, I want to do this now. Because, it's like I said, it's like insurance. Hopefully you don't have to use it. But if you do,
You have
you
it just.
are damn glad that you did it.
And so what are the fees associated with this? Like we have maybe an initial consult fee. I know we talk about freezing, so there's some type of storage fee. Like what could people expect like on average that you could spend? I know the length of time that you're saving and all of that comes into play, but just on average, what does a client spend on that?
Yeah, so when you think about options to pay for egg freezing in particular, there's basically three different options you have. You can either pay out of pocket
Mhm.
100%, right? You can get fertility financing. So there's options out there, where you can get on payment plans. And then you have insurance.
Okay.
And all those things will vary. So if you do have insurance coverage, they will cover things like the consultation, because that's, a doctor's visit, if you will, like a copay. They may cover the fertility assessment. They may cover some of the lab tests and cost of anesthesia.
Okay.
But one of the things that typically that I've seen that is not covered more often than not is medication.
Okay.
So a lot of times you'll have in your insurance covers like, oh, like I'm going to make it up, one of the pharmacy providers cover medication. And I actually had to tell a client recently, I have never seen the different options of medication that any of my clients have had covered by standard insurance. They don't fall under that, like a Walgreens, a CVS,
Yeah.
right? Right. They don't fall under that. It's actually a specialty pharmacy that typically has to be delivered, and it falls outside of that realm.
Mm.
But nowadays, more and more often, there are companies that are either providing fertility benefits that cover what's, and they consider it to be social egg freezing in the
Mm.
benefits. Yeah, so they may cover 1 or 2 cycles, or they're buying supplemental fertility coverage to accompany whatever the insurance coverage of the company is. And some of these companies are it's called, one is called Carrot, another one is called Progeny, right? And they assist with or complement the insurance that your company
That's
offers, and
amazing.
they cover everything actually, and they cover more than one cycle sometimes.
That's
I have a
amazing.
previous client where they covered, I think, two. They definitely covered 2 of her cycles because she had one of those supplemental providers that I mentioned. I think it was Carrot that she had. So there's options. But to answer your question of, well, if it was out of pocket, how much does it cost? It really depends. But I typically quote based on my research and different clinics and different locations. And, the biggest variables are medication, because it's dependent on what your fertility
Okay.
levels are, and the actual fees and what goes into your package. But it can be anywhere between, $8 or $10,000, to 15 to $16,000. You know what I mean?
Gotcha.
Yeah, and that's just a range. So you may be able to find clinics that do it a lot, cheaper. I, was on a Clubhouse room. It was in a Clubhouse room recently, and a doctor on there said, you might be able to find a clinic that could do it for a couple $1,000s. I just have never found that type of clinic. And I don't know I haven't had any clients that have had such cheap, the cheapest that I've had a client pay for egg freezing. And it's because she had fertility benefits. Well, one, the cost from the clinic was about $4,500.
Okay.
And almost all of it was covered because of the insurance that she had.
Wow. Look,
Mhm.
it's just, as things evolved, I didn't even know that there was supplemental fertility insurance. So,
Yeah,
I
yeah.
mean,
And it's
it's
becoming more and more popular. And I even tell people, clients, listen, things don't change unless we start asking for change. So if you're
mhm.
at a company and they currently don't offer fertility benefits, or it's limited, or it doesn't cover social egg freezing, ask about it. Go to your HR and say, hey, this is what I'm interested in. If you have an employee resource group, and you guys meet or whatever it is, or you even can just corral a few other women and have you all come to your HR business manager. The more people that come to them asking for this, when it's time for, re-enrollment and things, they can
Mm-hmm.
start to inquire. And even you can come to them with some of these supplemental programs and say, hey, they sometimes they have a tab that says for employees, here's what you want to say to your job, right? Here's what you want to present. And I even put together a little blurb for my clients who
I
don't
love
have it.
that.
Here's what you can go to HR with. It includes stats, it includes the supplemental insurance provider information, and it includes suggestions about employee resource groups, how to corral people, all that stuff, because it may not be now when you're doing it, but if you can sort of pass the baton and help the women behind you, 2, 3, 4, 5 years from now, who are working as hard as you are right now, and it's covered for them, I feel like, we can all make a difference
That's
in
a
a small
win.
way.
That's such dope advice to advocate for yourself and others at HR. Nothing. See, again, something I wouldn't have thought of. So before we wrap up, I do want to touch briefly on, because I feel like we focused on surrogacy and egg freezing, but in vitro. I feel like of all of the
The I word, right?
yeah, like I feel like that is the most commonly heard thing. I think now we're at spaces. I know a couple people who have conceived
Mhm.
via multiple rounds of IVF, as you know, it's abbreviated. Um, I feel, and this is just me being an outsider looking in on other people's experiences. I feel like IVF seems to be um, a way more emotional process than I think people think about. As I've watched people that I know um, kind of trying to plan. We know we have 3 tries we can do that'll be covered, but if we need that 4th one, that one's going to be $15,000. And are we going to do that? And I feel like the emotional toil of trying to effectively plan how they're going. It was like a strategy session, it seemed like.
Yeah.
And so for people who might come to you or interested in IVF, what tips do you have for them as they're exploring that option?
So this is I want to preface this with, all of this is really subjective. It really depends
Mm-hmm.
on what your life is like, whether you're single, whether you're in a partnership, how soon you're ready to have kids, what your ideal age was or is to
Mm-hmm.
have children, and what your current life looks like now, and how much you're willing to give up, how much you're willing to navigate through, because fertility is not a straight path. No matter how much you plan, no matter how much you think, you're prepared for it, there are always surprises in some form or fashion. And when you talk about it being sort of the hardest as it relates to that process, my subjective opinion, at least for me through my experience, was really the emotional piece of it. Some people are like,
Mm-hmm.
I can't take needles and I can't, some people can hire a nurse. Done. Address that, right?
Wow.
It's a fee to pay, but you don't have to worry about needles. Some people say, I need someone to drive me and do my planning for my appointments. Cool. They'll bring someone in to help them prepare that. I'm not prepared for how much it's going to cost. Cool. They can bring in someone like me and I can help them do all that planning, right? But there's some of it that you just can't hire someone else to do, right? And the medication, you have to take that. How it's going to impact your body, your emotional well-being, you have to take that, right? Whether it works and the hope that you have for it, but the realism that it might not,
Mm-hmm.
you have to deal with that. And you know I don't actually think so. This, and again, this is my opinion. Egg freezing and IVF, I like to think of them as one and the same.
Okay.
And it's cut in half. So egg freezing is half, right, of an IVF cycle. What it is, so the first part of an IVF cycle is, you do all the fertility assessments, they follow your cycle, they plan it, you take medications, they stimulate your follicles, they, develop eggs, right, so that they can harvest and take out. Right. When they take out those eggs, the viability of those eggs then determine whether they can be fertilized, right? And same thing with the sperm, right? They do the sperm testing, are they, in a good condition to fertilize eggs? And then they create embryos. And then they say, okay, what are the viability of these embryos? Did they make it, right? Are they strong enough to be able to be implanted? So when you think about egg freezing, you do all the medications, you do all the stuff, they create the eggs and they retrieve them, right? So I like to think of it as you're halfway there.
Gotcha. Okay.
Right? It's still an emotional, I don't know if you can curse on this, but it's still an emotional. Okay, it's an emotional motherfucker. Like, it is so much,
wow.
right? But when I did it, I thought of it as, at least I'm breaking this up. So when I'm ready to use them, I am now starting from, okay, I need to fertilize them and create embryos. I need to thaw the eggs. Hopefully, they make it through the thawing process, and then I need sperm and they can create embryos. I still don't need to do anything. I'm still at home, right? And then once they've created the embryos, right? And, they usually, you can freeze them and then use them at a later date. So when you're ready to use the embryos, now I'm up to bat, right? So gotcha. I had my, okay. So I'm coming up to bat when it's time to do a transfer. So for me, I've broken up that emotional, physical, mental toll. Now I still need to take medications and do all that stuff, right? But now I'm on the other half of it. Okay. And when it comes to IVF, ideally, when you do a cycle, you create as many embryos as you can, and they are viable, and you freeze them. So later on, when you do cycles, you already have your embryos. So the medication and things that you're taking is really to prepare your body for the transfer.
Gotcha.
And then it's this waiting game. You have about 2 weeks of waiting to see if they implant and your body, takes to it. And then that's another emotional journey, it's like, it just anything that anybody would ever wait for on pins and needles, that is how you feel, especially when it's not your first time, because there are failed transfers.
Yeah. And so, like, what would you recommend for people who are going through this process in terms of emotional support? Because it seems like it can be many highs and lows during this process where you're like, I'm excited, we have embryos, yay, we're gonna do the transfer, and then it's unsuccessful. So
that's what makes it so hard.
Yeah.
And that's what makes it so hard, is that this is an emotional roller coaster and so much is out of your control. So, it's the emotional support to me is really important with the partner that you have. And if you're deciding to go through this single, whoever you have, right? If it's your rada, right? Your best friend, your mama, your sister, whoever it is, your cousin that can be there with you. Because even if you're someone like me who manages their emotions relatively well, when you're taking medications and hormones, that goes out the window. So anything that you would have had control over to say, okay, bring yourself back down. Let's think about this rationally. Hormones don't allow you to do that, right? So you have these like artificial, changes happening because of the medication, the hormones for the medication. So you don't have the control. So when you might have been able to control how sad you might get or how easily reacted, you don't have it to bring yourself down. So you either need someone to cry with you, right? Hold your hand as you're crying, right? Because you don't want to hear people saying it's going to be fine, it's going to work,
and
right?
You're like, no.
right. Because then you want to punch him in the face. Like, how do you know?
You don't know. Up. Yeah.
You're not a doctor, so just shut the fuck up, right? And then you upset at them. You want someone who's going to just be there as you go through this, because you're not even always able to control those emotions because of the hormones. So you need somebody there with you, whoever it is, that's going to show up, someone who's reliable, someone who knows your favorite things to eat, who knows the things that bring you joy, who knows how to pick you up, right? If you have a puppy, a dog, a cat, whatever, bring them too. You know what I mean? Like, they got to stay in the lobby or stay in the car, but they're on the car ride with you, because your body responds to stress, right? And in order for your body to respond its best to the medications and to all of this science that is helping you develop this family, uh, it's important to minimize your stress, whether that's through acupuncture, whether that's through yoga, whether that's through
Mm.
prayer, whether that's through exercise, whatever it is that helps you de-stress. It is so important to try to establish a regimen, a routine. And I focus a lot on that with my clients also because, I'm not a doctor. I'm just a Black woman that has gone through some shit.
Look, you have a cool title. You are a fertility doula. Like, I love that.
Yeah. So, and I compliment the doctors. I talk about a lot of the things that they don't talk about. I address the things that they don't, necessarily address. And that's sort of all the other side. So outside of the science, right? Outside of
Yeah.
clinical stuff is how you feeling, right? Is what you need right now is, how can we make you feel good? Because that is when your body, like they say, like there's a lot of things in life that affect your body because of stress.
Stress, like,
Stress kills, right?
stress
Fertility is no
literally
different.
kills. Yeah.
Fertility is no different. You know what I mean? So stress can kill the whole process, and it doesn't
Yeah.
make sense to continue to go through it if you're so stressed. And as it relates to my personal story, I was so stressed going through the early stages of my fertility journey. And I did, IUIs, which is intrauterine insemination. I did a few of those, right? And I took a bunch of other medication to make sure I was ovulating, all the stuff that they tell you to do, right? Before you actually do the IVF piece. And I was so stressed, but I was stressed before I even started the process. So it's like I needed to check AMA first.
Yeah.
So any woman, any partnership, I would highly encourage that if there's any triggers in your life, acknowledge them and minimize them. And it might be people. You know what I mean? It might be people, and you're gonna have to kind of you kind of got to get pushed to the
Gotta set
side.
up those boundaries
Yeah,
to,
set up
yeah.
those boundaries, protect your peace. I'm big on protecting your peace, at least for amount of time, because you don't realize how stressed you are until you're not stressed that way anymore. It just feels different because you think it's normal because this is how you feel all the time. But then when you cross a threshold and you're starting to take on regimens in nutrition plans and just different lifestyle, maybe changing who's in your life and who's in your circle, you're like, oh shit, I was
This is
so
peace.
stressed
Yeah,
before.
like, like this is what peace feels like.
This is what peace. Oh shit, what was I
Yeah.
doing before then? Like so yeah, it's super important to me.
Look, since this is my shit, I'm changing up the flow. We're not going to do the breakdown. I think that was like the perfect place to end on
Okay.
your kind of empowerment speech for the people who are doing this, who are going to start this journey.
I could talk all day about this. So
that's so bomb because people who find, and especially with your personal story, you've developed this passion to help other people who are, like yourself or not like yourself. And it is definitely important work that needs to be done. So
yeah, and I'm not gonna lie, it's not easy, right? Because I'm still an entrepreneur, I'm still a business owner, I'm still a Black female business owner in America, in an industry that there's huge disparities for patients, let alone the owners of these things. And every day is hard. And when I think about, okay, why are you doing this again? I get reminded of why I started and why I want to continue. And this is kind of, I guess, away from fertility, more of like business advice.
Yeah.
You have to know your why, right? You have to be rooted and understand and very clear about your why, because sometimes that's the only thing that will keep you going, because the money might not be coming in, right? You might not.
Especially in those dark moments where you're like, fuck all this shit, I'm quitting.
Yeah. And even if you quit for a moment, because sometimes I do quit for a moment, like 30 minutes. And I'm like, no, there's so many people that need this help. I'll jump on a Clubhouse, or I'll get an email, or someone will reach out like you, on Instagram. And I'm like, all right, this is why I'm doing this. This is why I'm doing this. Okay, cool. I'm back in the game, coach. Put me back in.
Look, I love it. So if people are listening to this and they want to, hire your services, consult with you on their journey, where can they find you on social media, on the interwebs? Just plug everything.
Yeah. So Global Fertility Connections is the name of the company. You can just pop it in Google, or you can type in globalfertilityconnections.com, and it goes directly to my website. And if you type in Global Fertility Connections, no spaces, on Instagram or Facebook, we will pop up there. It's, I mean, we were marketing majors, right, Adrian?
Come
So
on now,
we
look.
know the importance of having exactly what your name is, exactly what those keywords are that,
Exactly.
and being consistent across the platforms. And Ama Gordon is my name. So even if you looked me up, if you Googled Ama Gordon and Global Fertility Connections, it'll come up there. Also, you can follow me on Instagram. It's underscore Ama, AMA, underscore Gordon, GORDON. Somebody took my full name, so I had to add those
You did the
underscores.
dashes.
So it's so annoying, right? I wish I could have just had, my first and last name, but I had to put underscore Ama underscore
And it's
Gordon.
usually always like some bot account who's not even using
Right?
it, right?
Word. I looked at it, I was like, yo, you got like no posts. Like, give me
No
my
posts, no
name, right?
followers, and now I
Right,
can't get it.
right. And my
So
name is so simple because Ama's AMA
so
underscore
simple.
AMA underscore GORDON. So you can always follow me there too. And I'm always down to talk about fertility. And for people who live abroad, I don't know if you have any listeners that have
Look,
traveled or are
UK is
traveling.
heavy over here.
Yes, yeah, yeah. And my business partner is in Australia, and we have consultants in Germany and in Spain. So
Oh,
we
awesome.
have the globe covered, so we can help you in your time zone as well.
Look, that's perfect. So I will link all of those in the show notes and on the booniebreakdown.com so you can easily access them. And Ama, thank you so much.
Thank you for having me. I hope there was something that I said that helped at least one person.
Oh, I'm sure. I'm sure.
All right. Thanks, guys, for having me.
All right, guys, that is it for this week's episode. I want to thank our guest, Ama Gordon of Global Fertility Connections. Like she said, I hope you learned so much about the quest for parenthood for intended parents. And if you need more help on the journey, be sure to reach out to Ama, hit her up, follow her on social media for more tips and advice. All right. Also, be sure to support our sponsor for this episode, Erin Condren. There is a code to save $10 off of your purchase of $40 or more. It's in the show notes and on thebooniebreakdown.com. And if you enjoyed this episode, I encourage you to listen and subscribe to the podcast on Apple Podcasts, Spotify, Amazon Music, Stitcher, Google Podcasts, iHeartRadio, YouTube, or any app that you listen to your podcast on. Don't forget to leave those reviews too. You might just hear your review on the next episode. Follow us on all social media. Share the episode with those you love, those you don't love, those you fucking hate. I don't make these pretty images for nothing, okay? Have a dope ass week. Stay healthy, safe, and sane. And remember, the ratchet in me always honors the ratchet in you. Until next time.